What would the gaming industry be without delusional game developers? And that's the case with Red Thread Games and Dustborn, as the developer of that game and lead director comes out with his own statements after the massive failure of Dustborn on Steam and all platforms. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about Dustborn. It's a game that's highly focused on political activist philosophies that we've been seeing growing in the video gaming industry, at least the Western game development industry, for the past 10 years. And the result we have here is the culmination of the political hatred towards what happened in 2016 and an overall changing of the administration from Obama to Trump. And this is exactly what the game director said in the development process of this game. This is a statement of what happened and the activism that he wants to put out in the world for what he believes is against a moral low of society. And ultimately, we get Dustborn, an activist game in a fascist state, and of course, you play many diverse characters that have their own annoying character traits that seem wholly unlovable and aggressively annoying. And this is a situation we see with a lot of these activist-oriented games where we just don't get anything interesting when it comes to gameplay-wise and story-wise. We get amazingly simple concepts convoluted and made unintelligible by low-grade storytellers, and ultimately we get uninteresting and boring characters. And I think that is the perfect review of what Dustborn is for a lot of video game players that have played it. And it hasn't been that many game players that have played this game. If you look at the Steam charts, it barely reached an all-time peak of around 83 players, and of course 28 players consistently, and now it's kind of around 2, 3, 5 to 9 players each day playing this game. It's a massive failure, and it's a massive failure that is still being supported by a studio head that sees a bright future for Dustborn. And this is bringing us to the conclusion of what we've been seeing happening all throughout the gaming industry, where we have delusional developers assisted by gaming journalists that have their own agenda reviewing this game amazingly positive in comparison to massive Game of the Year candidates like Black Myth Wukong and of course Stellar Blade, which have almost similar review numbers, but their fan bases reach out to the millions and are making over billions of dollars for those franchises and getting massive critical and overall gamer reviews from real gamers that absolutely love the game. And that is the opposite of what we're seeing with Dustborn, and the developer doesn't seem to see that as a problem at all, as he comes out and gives an interview about the situation with Red Thread Games and what's the future of the gaming industry in general. And he kind of has no remorse for the content that he produced, and of course I wouldn't expect the developer to have any remorse for that, but he gives an interesting interview of what he sees happening in the gaming industry and what happened to Dustborn itself, and it shows his own personal delusion of what will happen in the gaming industry in the future of games themselves, because he talks about the wild falsehoods that have happened around Dustborn and the political controversy. He says he was completely off guard by what happened in the extreme reaction to the launch, and he had no plan to handle it. And I think this is a reasonable statement to say, because this is a small studio of 12 people. They didn't expect this game to be a massive hit in any way, but they expected it to have moderate success and attention, and I think it did get massive amount of attention, and it just resulted in a no amount of success. And this is just showing the gaming audience in general that are not receptive to your ideas, and they almost all the time kill a franchise or a studio if you don't make something that is oriented towards them. I think that is the gaming audience that a lot of video game developers like to ignore. They go for a political activist audience that is so minute, but they still go after them, calling them the modern audience, when in actuality the modern audience is nobody. And of course the gaming audience is the main audience you should be going for, because they'll play your game if it has activist elements in it, but only if the game is great and has appealing storylines. But unfortunately for a lot of these activists, they don't know how to make games and they don't know how to tell a good story, and that's the result that we're seeing here with Dustborn, where I tried to play this game. It was just unintelligible, the story was stupid, and overall the characters were aggressively annoying. And I think that's the element that a lot of the game developers nowadays that are working on games don't know how to do. They don't know how to make interesting and engaging characters. They're so stuck in their political philosophy that they have no idea how to make someone interesting, because they just want to represent the ideals that they want to represent, nothing else. And that is the result of Dustborn, where you get a representation arc where nothing is about anyone and everything is about representation, and that is just wholly uninteresting. Of course, what happened with Dustborn. They got a bunch of hate mail upon the release of the game itself. The director goes into that saying they were surprised by a lot of the death threats, but that is just Twitter, that is just Reddit, that is just all over the internet for the past 15-20 years. If someone hates something you made, they wish death upon you, and they just leave it at that. No one's actually gonna come and kill you or do anything like that. But of course, these statements are taken to be placed in a victim stance for a lot of the developers. They want to be seen as victims of a horrible gaming community that needs to be destroyed and remade to a modern audience that wouldn't do this to them. And that is just not going to happen, because you won't make money that way. And that is what we're just seeing from game developers like this. So this is the CEO, Ragnar Tornquist. He's the CEO and founder of Red Thread Games. There's only 12 people that are working on these games. So I have to say, they made a game, and that is impressive in and of itself. I think that's the thing I respect about this gaming studio. They didn't try to take any other property. They didn't try to subvert an already established icon like Lara Croft and Tomb Raider, like Spider-Man, or any of these big entities that we all enjoy and admire. No, they made their own property, and I think that's the thing I give them respect for. And I think this is where I agree with them. Everything was blown out of proportions, at least for this game itself, because this is a very small studio. They weren't expecting to make hundreds of millions of dollars. I think they were barely expecting to make $5-6 million, and that's making back their budget and overall making a tiny profit where people can live comfortably for at least a year or two before they make a new game. And I think that's their essential goal, and unfortunately they didn't reach that goal. And another thing I had a problem with this game in particular is the satire, where I think they were trying to be serious with all the bully mechanics and overall trigger, cancel, gaslighting mechanics that they put into the game, where I'm like, okay, this would be funny if this was a satire, but they took this seriously in the game. So it makes you think, are you making something funny, or do you really believe this is a tactic that should be used by progressive individuals? Because you're playing progressive, socialist, communist individuals during this game, so it feels right in line with that ideologies, and I don't think they're making fun of that ideology. It seems like they really believe in bullying, lying, gaslighting, triggering to manipulate people. I'm like, okay, and you're trying to show this person, the head character, as a good person, when in actuality they're doing a lot of evil things. I don't think it's a satire, but he says it's whatever you want to think it is, and I think that is him just saying, yeah, we're serious about this, and now we just realize we're showing ourselves in the truest light. And I think that is just them reflecting back on that. Of course, they go into the pronoun situation. He says that is a new reality of the world. We just deal in pronouns and stuff like that. And I think for a lot of people that live in reality, we know that is just nonsense right now. And we're just looking at this game as one of those nonsense pieces that is trying to promote that ideology. And this is the result of people pushing against your ideology, because it's not the reality for most people. And that's why people rejected your game. Unless you co-op and take over a massive franchise or a gaming studio, like some of the games with Bethesda Games and other big game developers that are being pushed by consultancy firms to follow this trend, where it's bringing them backlash, where it's making their games fail as they do this, like Starfield with Bethesda. That's the only way that it's a reality, when you try to force it upon the game players. And I think this is the result of the delusion that we see within the gaming industry, where people are stuck in their ideology and they don't know how to get out of it. They're just in circles with this ideology. And you can see this happening with this developer with Red Thread Games, where they don't believe they made a flop of a game when the numbers say they made a flop of a game. Barely 10 people are playing this game every day. It's just showing that you made a game that is just not appealing to the fan base, and you made it with government money. And I think that is the thing that is annoying fans as well, because our government taxpayer dollars are going to make trash games, and it just shows the ideology of the government that's producing this content, and it's abrasive and off-putting for the player base. And this is a result of a game that is just not in line with what the game players want, and it just shows the delusion of the game developers themselves that are sticking by this. And at his end quote for this article, he says he's sticking by this values of diversity that he wants to focus on, which I'm okay with, but you have to make a good game behind it. And if your focus is mainly diversity and not good storytelling, good gameplay, then we don't need your game in the game industry, because it's going to be a failure regardless of your political ideology. And I think this goes back to conservatives, Christians, and anyone else that's making a game. If you make a game that's terrible, no one cares about your ideas. And I think that is how the market should be. But that's just my thoughts on the situation. Maybe you disagree with me. You leave your comments. Tell me what you think. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.